services here on campus, and specifically I am the counselor and liaison to our College of Arts and Sciences. And we are very fortunate to have with us today Lisa Verzella, who is an account manager and sales director from Monarch Staffing here in the Philadelphia area. And so she is going to bring us the real scoop and the real world perspective on what employers are looking for in cover letters. And thank you so much for coming, Lisa. Yeah. So just before we get started, I'd love to get just a couple of comments in the room about the things that you find difficult, if you've ever tried to write a cover letter, like what stumps you, or what are your questions in general about cover letters before we get started? Yeah.
Where the line is between too casual and comfortable versus too stiff and professional?
Great question. Okay, cool. How about you?
It's like that line between pleading for the job and like, can you please consider me?
Yeah, so you're not sounding like you're begging, but sounding interested.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Was there anyone else back there?
Depending on whatever their requirement is, the line between, are you telling them too much about yourself, or are you stating too much that's basically in your resume, or where do we draw the line?
Right, so are you just like repeating the resume, or are you saying something else? Okay. All right, great. So thank you for that, and we'll make sure that we answer all those questions. And for anyone who is interested in having a copy of this presentation afterward, if you send a quick email to careers@widener.edu and just one line, please send cover letter presentation, we'll make sure that you get it. All right, so why write a cover letter in the first place? Well, sometimes you have to, right? Because the application says and upload your cover letter and your resume. But it's also your chance to make a really strong impression even before someone gets to your resume. So Jen Moppert, our director, calls the cover letter kind of your come hither, like enticement to read the resume. So I think to your point, it can tell a story and go beyond the resume. It can draw the reader in. And done well, it can take you to the top of the candidate pool. And unfortunately, done poorly, it can have the opposite effect and take you out of the running. So before we go further, I'd love to hear your comments on that, Lisa.
Sure. So for a staffing agency, we are interviewing people all day, every day for a myriad of positions. It's not just one specific position that we're looking to fill. So oftentimes, and with employers in general, they're busy. Sometimes they may not ask for a cover letter because they are very busy, and time to take to read a cover letter as well as a resume doesn't come into play. But it was interesting, I was actually at a seminar myself, and a gentleman from Boeing was there, and the question came up about cover letters to him. And the one thing that stuck in my head that he said, and I carry it with me, is that the cover letter can be the thing to either get you the job or hang you in the end. Because if it's not done well, and I've seen people lose very high-paying jobs to typos, grammatical errors in a cover letter. So they had the qualifications for the job, but if an employer is on the fence between two candidates, and that's the one thing that they will go to help them make that decision, that deciding factor can be down to minute details like that. So it's really important that you're just as vigilant with your cover letter as you are with your resume. And I agree with some of the questions that, you don't want to regurgitate what's in the resume, that's already there, but the cover letter is that personal introduction to yourself. Just as on your resume, the days of the objective have gone by the wayside. Instead, we always suggest that you do a summary at the top of your resume. So this can enhance that summary, I think, as well.
Exactly. So thank you for that. And in addition to some of what Lisa shared, some of what we hear from employers is, please don't send me a form letter. Don't send me a generic letter. If you have a cover letter that's written for Boeing in your first paragraph, and if you could take out Boeing and put in Starbucks, and it would be the same letter, it's probably not the right letter. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Because it's not customized, and we're going to show you an approach in a couple of minutes to cover letters that's pretty easy to follow. And the other piece of feedback we get a lot is, help me connect the dots between what you bring to the table and what my opportunity is. So in other words, don't just write a monologue, I'm good at this, I have this skill, I'm good at this, and it's the same for every letter. Help the reader of the letter make the connection between your strengths, your skills, your knowledge, your interest, and specifically what that employer is asking for. And then to underscore what Lisa just said, absolute proofreader, because fair or not, you could be the best potential employee, but sloppy letter says sloppy employee, and they'll make that inference, right, to your point. So we're going to talk a little bit about formatting, and again, I will send this to you, so don't worry about taking notes. But in general, you want to, when you start with dear, you want to have a colon and not a comma, because it's a business letter. You want the body of your letter to be either blocked or indented paragraphs. You want your closure to have sincerely or regards, followed by a comma. Leave 3 spaces, then your signature and your full name. So again, I will send this to you. That might be a little hard to see, but that would be an example of what the formatting could look like. And if you developed your resume already and you have letterhead for your resume, you can use the letterhead for your cover letter. You can use that for your reference list, and it gives you a nice pulled together branded look. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and that is something, it needs to be aesthetically pleasing to the eye as well as the content of the letter. So the way that it covers the whole page, your indents, everything, it is very pleasing to look at. So I think that's.
And you want to try to stay on a page, right?
Right,
For an
right.
undergraduate?
Oh,
Yeah,
gosh, yeah, absolutely, especially for a cover letter. Exactly.
Okay, and so just as something to add on here, this process that we're going to talk about today for specific jobs when you're applying, you can use this process to write to an organization that you're interested in working for, even when there's no ad or post, and you could just use this format to ask for an informational interview, and you could talk about why you're interested in the organization versus why you're interested in a specific job. Do you do informational interviews for Monarch?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to do your homework, to find out about the company, and then go that next step and visit sites like Glassdoor, tap into your connections on LinkedIn to find out what kind of an environment it is, because it's really important that you're going to spend a lot of time there. So
Exactly.
you need to make sure it's a place that you want to be and that you'll be comfortable and be able to grow and develop in. So it's important to do your homework and find out as much as you can about the company, and not just from their website, but all of those other avenues as well. Talking to people that work there already, reaching out to them. That's the power of LinkedIn and how that can help as well.
So great time to use those social media skills,
Oh,
right?
absolutely. Yeah.
All right, so we're going to introduce this format today called ABC, and this is not meant to be insulting, it's just a mnemonic device to remember. So 3 paragraphs. So the first paragraph is A, and the A is for about. So what you want to address in that first paragraph is what about this role or this organization interests you. And if someone referred you, so let's say one of your professors referred you to this organization, you want to mention that first. You want to drop that name in the first line of your letter, especially if the person who referred you knows the person on the other end or the company on the other end that you're writing to. And you want to talk about why you're applying for this job. What about this job attracts you? We see many letters, and I come from a background in recruiting too, so this is not just current students. And maybe you see these 2 people who are 20 years out, and the letter will start, I am writing to apply for the director of admissions job at Widener University. And it's just not a catchy way to begin it, right? Like they probably know you're applying for the job of director of admissions at Widener University. So you want to, and close, please find my resume. You want to start by saying why, and to state your strengths. So as someone who has an undergraduate degree in communications and strong skills of persuasion and loves the higher education environment, I was excited to learn about this opportunity in the admissions department of my alma mater, and on. It's something that is specific, so that it makes a convincing case why you're applying for this job in the first place. Because like in the rest of life where people like to talk about themselves or they like to be liked, you're still having people reading these letters on the other end, and they want to know that you really want to work there. And I'd love your input on that, Lisa.
I think the other thing to keep in mind too
Yeah.
is you're competing
Yeah.
for a position, and there are many other folks that are doing the same. So how do you stand out in that crowd to make it? And I think too, to kind of put yourself in the employer's shoes for a minute. They are looking at this, influx of letter after letter, resume after resume. It can get brutal. And so how, if you were in that role, what are the things that would capture your attention? And again, that goes back to understanding the company and its culture and what's going to be important to them. So, a much more conservative company is going to, I think, take things a little differently than, I think about some of the clients that we have that are a little more progressive, and the way that they, even when you look at a job posting, there's a company that we work with out in Newtown Square called Pet Plan Insurance. We do insurance for animals, and their customer service reps are called happiness managers. So that gives you an idea of the culture of the company. So knowing that that's where they're coming from, that should be kind of a clue on how to tilt your letter. Make it be part of that culture instead of that rigid.
As opposed to if you were writing to a law firm or an
Exactly,
investment bank.
exactly, yes.
That's a
yes.
really, really good point. So here's just an example. So this might be a very typical opening that we would see. And again, not only for students, but you may see this with more experienced professionals. I saw your job posting on Indeed.com. I'm a hard worker and great with people. I could be a real asset to your organization. So what do you guys think about that as an opening? Does that grab you? Yeah, it's just kind of, yeah, exactly. So again, this is specific to one field, but here we have Dr. Kathleen Normand, professor of name dropping, professor of psychology at Widener, suggested I contact you regarding your upcoming need for an intake counselor. I'm very interested in employment in the area of family services and believe that my qualifications would allow me to make a solid contribution to, in the name of the organization, upon my graduation in December. So just more specific, right? Dropping a name, what you're interested in. So that's the about. So does anyone have any questions about the about?
And dropping that name out of the gate is huge. That is going to grab them from the beginning. And 87% of recruiters are filling jobs with referrals. So that means it's who you know. That old adage of it's not what you know, it's who you know. I think it still stands firm. So dropping that name at the very beginning is such a punch in the face. You know what I mean? Like they are going to get that, like, oh, I know that person, and then draw them in to read even more. And it lends to the credibility of your letter too, because of the person that they're affiliated with. So that is very strong to me to mention that up front. And it's all about connecting people. So
And it's a lower risk hire for the organization if it's
Sure.
coming in through some referral.
Absolutely, absolutely, because, like I said, it's competitive. You've got a number of people, coming at them for this job. So if they've got someone that they trust in their network, and you become connected with them, that's all the more they have that space in between. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's the A, and now we go into the B. And the B is because. And this is the part of the letter where you're building your case. So remember we talked a couple of minutes ago about connecting the dots? So this is where you want to think about, what is this company asking for? Why are your skills and interests a match? Back it up, give a couple of examples. You can even break this into 2 paragraphs if it's too long. And something that we suggest to students that I think is helpful is that if you can literally copy and paste the job description into your letter while you're writing it, and then take your highlighter and highlight the points where you feel there's the best overlap between what that company is asking for and what you bring to the table, that will give you a clue about the things to focus on. Because if the employer is asking for 17 requirements, you're not going to be able to, in a page, answer all 17. But maybe you can do a really good job speaking of rate. And there's kind of a saying in job application world that you don't just want to claim it, you want to explain it. So you don't just want to say, I have good communication skills. You want to say, you know, your ideal candidate will possess strong written communication skills. You know, during my 3 years at Widener, I have written for our social media outlet. I have done so and so and so and so, and so you're backing it up. You're not just stating it. Do you have any other thoughts about that?
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about connecting the dots
Yeah.
and helping them, because it may not be very evident in your resume, the connection, so you need to explain that, and show them where the connection is. One of my favorite stories of a success at Monarch staffing was the gal that came to us that was a nanny all her life, and she made really great money. She loved her job, but in that world, the kids grow up, and sometimes the families move away, and that's what happened with her. So she wanted to get back into the corporate world, but all her resume screen was nanny. So when we presented her to the client, a position came about that we knew she could handle. She presented very well. Her testing, her technical skills were excellent. She was more than capable of handling this job, but she didn't have that direct experience in her past. So what we needed to do when we're presenting a candidate to a client is connect the dots for them. Show them, and we do it basically in a blurb, in an email, because we're working with them on a regular basis, but show them why this gal would be a good fit for that position. And those are the things that, and if she had submitted on her own, I can guarantee you that her resume would have made it to the no pile, just based on her resume, because it was just nanny, and that's all that they saw, but they didn't, how do we connect the dots of what our needs are for this particular position? So we had to point that out to them. So that is really, really important to make the connection for them, and especially when you're just coming out and you're trying to transfer your skills that you've either used or learned while you're in school to a paying job. You know, how does that translate for them? At least what can you do for them? So I think it's really important to point it out.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes those skills can come, you know, how many of you, for example, in the room are RAs? You've been RA? Yeah. So that is an example of such a great role on campus when you're applying for a job in the real world, where you talk about, you know, let's say the job description calls for somebody who can navigate conflict or be flexible. Well, what better example than what you have to do as an RA? So don't discount your activities, your leadership roles on campus, your volunteer work, all of that, because you have all these sources from which you can pull examples. So we'll do another quick before and after again, and this one I will admit is a little silly, but I see that you are looking for someone to plan events. I'm a great party planner, just ask my friends. You are also looking for a good proofreader. I am great at this too. So, or not, maybe not. So that's our before version, and here's our after version, which goes with the first paragraph. So this past summer, I served as an intern with the Southeastern Pennsylvania Geriatric Services and helped the director develop a pilot project designed to curb abuse of elderly family members. I know you recently received a federal grant to develop a similar program for the Camden area, and I'm confident that I could contribute significantly to the implementation of this program. Now, the B could be longer than this, but going back to what Lisa was saying about doing your homework, can you guys pick up the sentence in that letter that really shows the person was doing their homework? Yeah.
Or they said they received a federal grant.
Exactly, because that shows that they went beyond just looking at the job description and took the time to research the organization. Now, would that stand out for you? If you were a meeting
Absolutely,
provider?
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Part of my job in developing business is to build relationships. And the way that I do that is follow companies and look for news that comes up. It's fodder for conversation. Articles that I'll read that maybe pertain to a certain, something new initiative in the company. I'll often share that with them just to get that conversation to help to build that relationship. And this is relationship building in a very, small way, but that's where it all starts, so. Yes, ma'am?
So, I mean, if even if the first paragraph was not interesting, would you or even any other actual applicants even look down that far into the cover letter?
If you weren't wowed by the
Yeah.
first paragraph?
Like, are you gonna make it to the third or
Yeah.
fourth paragraph even if
Yeah.
the first one was crap?
I mean, for me, I would take the time, because it's in front of me now, let's give it a chance, is the way that, but that's me, and everybody's different, so, like I
Unless
say.
maybe it was riddled with typos or
Oh,
something like
yeah,
that.
yeah, I mean, if it was atrocious,
Yeah.
then, yeah, that might not be the case, but if it was on the fence a little bit, and I wasn't real wowed, I'm like, my personality is that I would take the time. I just tend to give people a fair shake, but there are a lot of employers out there that won't take the time.
I understand. Did they say it takes seconds, like the resume?
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
spin through it. I'm not sure if that's the same thing with the cover letter.
The cover letter, not all organizations, to be interested in your perspective, will ask for a cover letter. They don't all want it, but usually the ones that do ask for it place a fair amount of stock in it.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so now we're at the C, we're at close. C is for close, and this is really the easiest part of the letter. But you want to keep in mind that your goal, what you're asking for, is for an interview. That's your ask. So you're not asking it for the job, you're asking for an interview. So you want to, restate briefly your interest and qualifications and ask for that interview. If there's a way to follow up, if it's not a blind posting, if there's someone you can email or call, or if it's Lisa at Monarch and you say you're going to follow up, then follow up. And you want to thank them for their consideration. So here's another before and after. So tell me what you guys think about this. Please call me to arrange an interview. I look forward to hearing from you.
You're making assumptions.
Yeah, right? It's presumptuous, right? And it puts the onus on the employer, right? I look forward to hearing from you, as opposed to version B. I am available for an interview at your convenience and look forward to having the opportunity, or I would welcome the opportunity to meet with you. I will follow up next week. And then even though your contact information is at the top, it doesn't hurt to put it again. It can also be reached at these numbers. Thank you for your consideration. So this is really the easy part of the letter. It's the A and B that take more time. And unfortunately, a lot of times a student will come in and after reviewing the resume, the student will say, and I have my cover letter. Like, this is the cover letter I'll use, and this is my cover letter. And unfortunately, it's not as straightforward as that. While your resume might be tweaked a little bit for different jobs, your cover letter is going to change for every job you apply. And it doesn't mean it'll change completely if you're applying for entertainment starting early. If you're applying for similar kinds of jobs, you might be cutting and pasting some content, but it's still going to be different, especially in that first paragraph when you're explaining what interests you about that organization. It's still going to be different. So unfortunately, there's not going to be one cover letter. At least, would you agree with that?
Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
tailor it to the specific position, and I think it helps the employer to feel special by way of your letter, that you've taken the time, obviously, and again, it's going to help them to connect the dots even closer, because I think you can spot a form or a template letter from a mile away as soon as you started.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, there's no personality in it. But I do caution people that when you write, be careful. And I've seen people called out on, they use, $64,000 words in their letters or even in their resumes. And then the interview, if you're lucky enough to get the interview, they may counter you on that and they're caught off guard because that's not how they would typically speak. So to put that kind of language in there is not who they are, and it's not authentic, and it's not genuine. And you want to be genuine when you're writing, because when you show up, it's going to be you're not sending somebody else. So be yourself.
It's so interesting that you said that. We talked about that in a personal statement workshop for a few you reheard before, that you have to be who you are when you get to the job. And if you're not somebody who uses $64,000 words, and that's not who you are in the interview or you know, you don't wanna be someone you're not, because you have, as you said, you have to be you when you
Right,
start doing
right.
the job.
Especially if they call you on the carpet and say, what did you mean by this? And you have no idea what you meant.
Right, like, can I bring out my
This is
thesaurus?
like a
I'm
good
really not sure
word.
what I meant by that.
You know, yeah.
So
That's-
someone asked the question earlier about how personal to get. Was that you, like the difference between, so similar to what we talked about in personal statements, you want to tell a compelling story about yourself, but you don't, and you don't just want to, you know, rehash your resume and just repeat what's in it, but you don't want to get so personal in that cover letter that it almost feels embarrassing, or that someone on the other end might feel like, oh, this is like a little too much information. You don't want to come on that strong. But so you want to tell them just enough to be interested in you as a person, something that they might not be able to discern immediately on the resume. And it can be a fine line. You know, we really recommend, you know, when you come to career services or get other feedback, that, you know, we'll go through 1 or 2 of them with you. And after that, you really start to get the hang of it. Once you get 1 or 2 done, you get the approach. It's not like it's impossible. It's just kind of daunting at first because it's something different. And not just for students. I think there are people with 20 years of experience that it's very hard for.
Sure.
So, yeah.
And if you tend to ramble, be careful. I mean, you're always going to proof and edit your letter. You should, at least. But if you tend to ramble and go off on those tangents that have nothing to do with the subject at hand, be careful about that. Again, you're taking up someone's time, so you want to make sure that it's pertinent to what they're looking for.
Like in a job interview, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And you're right, there is that uncomfortable feeling when people start to talk about their children, or their spouse, or their home, or their, you know, that is not relevant to the job at all, so you don't want to be too forthcoming
Yeah.
with information like that if it's not relevant, for sure, yeah.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about just some housekeeping items. So again, if you want to coordinate a professional look, you can use the letterhead you use for your resume. You always want to save and upload your letter, just like your resume, in a PDF format, because if you don't, the formatting can get so wonky. Even when I read student letters at home sometimes from my iPad, and you know, it just can look like Greek, like it just changes the format. So save everything in Word so that you can make edits, but always send it, even if it's an email, always send it in PDF. And if you're sending it as an email attachment, you want to reference the position you're applying for in the subject line. If you're not going through a portal and you have the option of sending an actual person or an organization an email, you want to put it in the subject line so it's easy for them.
Yeah, because your inbox can get
Yeah, I'm
just
sure your
so
inbox is
full.
crazy.
Yeah,
Lisa,
and
you know.
you do scan to see what are the fires, I call them the fires that you have to put out, especially first thing in the morning. So the subject line carries a lot of weight. It really does. It's not something that's just menial. You should put some thought into what you're putting in that subject line to make it clear for the employer, concise, kind of cut to the point.
Now, what would you think if somebody were doing the name dropping and in the subject line, they also put in an email referred by? Would that be helpful to you in the subject
Yeah,
line?
I mean, I think it's gonna grab your
Yeah.
attention even quicker, sure. I don't think it would hurt at all. Again, it doesn't, you don't want it to get to go on forever, but, I don't think that would hurt.
Good. Okay. All right, so that is cover letters, and now we're going to move on to thank you notes. Yeah,
I'm
Eddie?
sorry, I forgot
No,
one more question.
Sure.
So when you're sending out, like, the title of your cover letter, so I would have, like, my name, Jackson Lucido, and then like, the job ID number right next to it as the save file, so that when I upload it, they know exactly which. Is that okay, or does that seem like, does it seem like I've almost generically made another cover letter, but this one happens to be for this
For
specific
that,
job?
yeah. I always caution when you reference job ID numbers, because, like, for me, I mean, we post all of our jobs on our website, and they are assigned a number. I'm not aware of those numbers. So if someone contacts me and says they want to talk to me about such and such a job number, that means nothing to me. So I would, tell me the title, tell me, you know, and for us it's location, things like that, but those numbers are assigned randomly oftentimes. So I think if you're more specific with what the title is, I don't know if you would agree.
Yeah, because I think if it's tied into a portal, are you talking about you're applying through a portal?
I'm thinking about like online submission portal.
Yeah.
Attachments, type of thing.
So it'll already be keyed to that ID number when you're applying on a portal, because you're clicking on a specific job description. So unless there's something in the instruction that says to you, please list the job ID, I'm thinking maybe you're applying for a federal government job or something like that, it might be just as easy to have your last name followed by your first name and the title. So moving on to thank you notes, and take questions. Before I go on to thank you notes, are there any more questions about cover letters, or does this seem like a format that might be relatively easy to follow or to try? Okay, all right, cool. And please come to Career Services, also the Writing Center. Who uses the Writing Center? A lot of people. Good. It's a good resource, isn't it? Yeah. And they also will help with cover letters and personal statements, so feel free to use them as a resource as well. So what's the single most important thing do you think to remember about sending a thank you note?
Within 24 hours.
All right, you're even better than we are. No, we used to have 48. Actually, we're down to 24 now, so we're, yep, that is exactly it. It's important to do one. And these days, you really can send it by email. That's fine. I would love to get your opinion on that. If there's a job you're really interested in and you want to go all out, then maybe follow up with a handwritten letter too. But these days, it takes so long for snail mail that you might lose out if the process is moving quickly and it gets there 15 days later, right? So,
I'm a fan of the handwritten note, I really am.
okay.
Well, especially since they're talking about getting rid of cursive writing and there's an art to me
Yes.
to it. And for me, and I don't get a lot of mail, snail mail. And most of everything that I see is via email. But when I do get mail, if it's an envelope that's a different color, and I love stationery, I love paper. That's just like something for me. So I go for those envelopes that are decorative, or the note cards that are, just that reflects my personality, I think. So when I send those, oftentimes I send thank yous to clients often for giving us business, for taking the time to meet with me, especially if I know that, again, in that relationship building that they are, I remember there was one woman that was a Snoopy fan. So I had found this card that had Snoopy on. I mean, those little things matter. They really do matter. So I think the immediacy of an email is I think most effective, but it's kind of fun to get things in the mail like that. So if you did want to follow up, and like you said, if it's a job you really, really want to send that out, I don't think there's any.
It's a way to stand out, right?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
sure, yeah.
Now, if you meet with several people, ideally you want to send each one a separate note. And you'll find, you may not find this in your first job interview process, but as you move on in your career, you may find that when you go to an interview that you meet with 5 different people. You might meet with them at once on a panel, or you might meet with them individually. And it's important to acknowledge those people. And so ideally, and this is not easy, but you want to take notes during the interview so you can include a point that you learned from each person during the interview. And I don't know if anyone's ever had the experience. Has anyone ever gone to a panel interview yet? Where there were a lot of people around the table?
It was 3 panels with 3 people.
Now, was that for a graduate school or was that for a job?
Job, full time.
And what was that like? How did you experience?
I liked it. It was star system based.
Okay,
The third one was.
so behavioral.
Yes, and the third one was like a thought process based.
Okay.
But I took everybody's names down, but I didn't actually send them out. I kind of forgot. I meant to, but I didn't end up. I kind of was unsure how to actually send it to them because I didn't know their like emails. I didn't know their physical address, like to get to their office.
So you can always ask at the end for business cards, for contact information, and that way you'll have it. One thing that I found is useful, even when I've been on the candidate end of the table, and see what you think, Lisa, is to actually like draw a picture quickly in front of me around the table, because people will usually introduce themselves. Yeah, and to just put the names and maybe just jot down a note or two when that person speaks, so that way I don't have to memorize it, because you're so nervous to begin with. And you have to be careful with that, though. We had a candidate for a job in our own office, and she really meant well. But I think she got the names mixed up, and it happened that I wasn't there for the interview, I was away, and she sent me this beautiful thank you note, except that I hadn't been there. And she talked about my interest in wine, and I was like, very nicely when I was there. And so, you know, you have to be, to be careful with
And that goes back to
Yeah.
attention to detail.
Right,
You know, is
right.
this person, you know, are they gonna do that on the job? So,
Right.
you know, some of those things, even though it's innocent that way, for sure. And I know that's probably another workshop, but that's something that we always caution people on at the end of the interview, especially if you're at someone's desk interviewing with them and their business cards are there. You never assume and just take it. You should never take something off of anyone's desk anyway. But always ask for the business card at the end, because the other thing you don't want to do is misspell a name, right? That could be like that's as bad as those typo grammatical errors. So always, you know, ask for their business card, and this way you have everything you need right there. You know, address, especially if there's a suite number. It can get very detailed, so you want to make sure you have all those details, and that's the best way, I think. Is the
Yeah,
business
and you have an email to follow up.
Right,
and-
exactly. Sure.
Okay, so here is an example of a thank you note, and again, I will send this to you, but I want to read you the second paragraph, just as an example, because it shows what you can do with a thank you note, is that you can build on something you learned during the interview. So I was excited to learn about your firm's plans to hire more native Spanish-speaking executives as you continue to build your business in Central America. My strong conversational ability in Spanish has been a great advantage to me in dealing with people from Spanish-speaking cultures, and I have experience communicating with diverse cultural and socioeconomic groups. So it's a way of underscoring a point that you might have made during an interview, or maybe a point you didn't have a chance to make, but it also shows that you are listening. So, which really goes to this, I gave a little bit away, but so extra credit question. So besides showing good manners or good etiquette, why else do you think you should send a thank you note? Yeah.
So they remember you?
So they remember you, absolutely, be memorable. Any other reasons, or? Yes, Amelia?
You just have to prove you were paying attention and learned something while you were there.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows that you were listening and that you learned something, absolutely. And, you know, I'm not meaning to make this sound too much like a sales transaction, but it really is in a way selling. It's another opportunity to close the deal. It's a way to reinforce what you said in the interview. You could add a point that you wish you made, right? You know how sometimes you walk out of a situation like, you know, why didn't I say that? And then you're out of there. To reinforce why you're a strong fit for this position. And to add a sample project, a paper, something that supports your response. When I was interviewed for a job in career counseling here 3 years ago, someone asked about my experience with presentations. And I told them about it orally, but then I thought, you know what, why don't I just attach an example of a presentation I've done about this topic, and I attached that with a thank you note. So it's really an opportunity, especially if you really want the job, to go all out. And people will really appreciate, to your point, that you were listening and that you cared enough to add something. And so again, it's the listening. It also demonstrates, and this is probably the most obvious in a way, but it shows your writing and communication skills, right? Most job descriptions talk about having good communication skills. But writing a letter is a great way to show you have good communication skills, whether it's a cover letter or a thank you note. And again, back to what Lisa was saying, it's so important with the attention to detail to spell everyone's name right and to proofread. So then we have some additional resources here, and again, I will send this to you, Purdue OWL, a lot of people use that for papers, but it's actually a great resource as well for cover letters and personal statements. And then we also have a link to this PDF. And does anyone have any questions? Lisa, I'd love it if you could talk for a little bit about Monarch and
Oh,
how you
sure.
work with applicants. and-
Sure, absolutely. So, the first part of my life was spent in the hospitality industry. I actually was with one of the hotels by the airport for 16 years. And we had change of ownership, and I left there. Actually did career services for a post-secondary school for a years, and then needed to change some things. Needed to make a change there. So I went to Monarch Staffing just because I figured they could help me find a job. Lo and behold, my timing is everything. In life, in love, in business, I'm telling you, timing is everything. So I went to her and my boss, we're a certified women's owned business, and with the intentions of her helping me to find a job, but lo and behold, she was looking for a sales director at that time. So came on board with her in 2008, and it was probably the worst time in the world to start at a staffing agency because the economy was bottoming out. So I was knocking on doors, literally, because cold calling was part of my job, knocking on doors, and people were running the other way because they needed help, but they didn't have the money. The economy was very, very bad at that time. So I did a lot of that, and for the first 2 years, I planted a lot of seeds. And then in 2010, 2011, into 12, those seeds started to come to fruition. And we're helping employers find great employees. I'm in the Springfield branch of Monarch Staffing, but we also have an office in Malvern that services Chester County, and our third office is in Bluebell to service the Montgomery County and down into the city as well. And we do staffing on a temporary, temp to hire, and direct hire basis. We see a lot of grads when they first come out, to help them to transition those skills into paying jobs and get their foot in the door. And that's a lot of what we do, is help people get their foot in the door. And then once you get your foot in the door, it's up to you to sell yourself. So we're just helping that along. So if anything, if that's something that you've considered, I would welcome you to visit our website, which is monarchstaffing.com. You can take a look at the open jobs on there. It will give you an idea of the kinds of positions that we staff for. And in this world of referrals, we, as a matter of fact, on a monthly basis, send out all of our hot jobs or our open jobs to a huge network that we have built over the years. And oftentimes people will get those jobs, look at them and say, oh, I have a friend that would be great for this, or I have a sister-in-law that would be perfect for this, and share those opportunities with other people. So that's a lot of what it's about too, is sharing, and then that comes back to you, believe me. So we help people find jobs on a temporary, temp to hire, and direct hire basis. A lot of companies will use temps if they have someone that's on vacation or out on maternity leave, or a lot of special projects right now that they just need extra hands to get a project done, and then they want to be able to let the person go. They only need them for a certain amount of time, so temps come in handy that way. Temp to hire is probably the most popular method of staffing, and that's where the employer has a chance to try before they buy. And in my eyes, it's a win-win situation, because you as the candidate going into that job, it's almost like a working interview. So you go in and you're working the job, and then after it's about 90 days, they can make you an offer for a permanent position there if they like you and if you like them.
And you're getting paid during the trial.
And you're getting paid, absolutely. And that's, just like an interview is a two-way street, it's the same thing here, that you want to make sure that this is a place that you want to work permanently, full-time. And then direct hire is just that, where they would hire you directly, bring you on board, and then we have a guarantee that comes with that. We want to be able to help them, keep the right person in place. And a lot of what our job entails is, it's not just fitting people that have a certain skill set to a certain job, it's fitting people to a certain culture. That's really, really important. You need to be able to fit in with the rest of the team, gel with the rest of the team. So if you're not the conservative person, then you shouldn't be in that law firm in Radnor or whatever it may be. And that's part of our job, is to make those matches so that the people fit with the culture of the company. We also offer testing services, so if a client is on the fence about someone and they need to know, their resume says they're proficient in Excel, but how do I know that? They can come to us and contract with us for testing, and it will show them hard numbers of their Excel skills or whatever that particular skill set is. And then we offer training as well. There's nothing more important than developing your own employees. So That's a lot of what we did in 2008 and 2009 because of the way that things were. People couldn't bring additional employees on. So then at that point, what we were selling them was, look, you know, you've got these employees in place that you need to work with, develop them, you know, make them your own and allow them to grow and become what you need them to be in those positions. So we've been around for 15 years. Like I said, we're certified women's owned business, so it's a girl power thing, but we help guys too, so it's all. But it's a lot of fun. I meet a lot of different people. Like I say, the biggest part of my job in business development or sales, as it would be, is to build relationships, and it really is about you know, it's fun to find out things about people. Even when you walk in their office and you notice their kids' pictures and different kinds of knickknacks, that's reason to break the ice and have conversations that help them build trust in you, because they're going to work with people that they like and they trust. And that's what I'm trying to do, is build that trust and those relationships. So it's fun.
And it sounds like you're open to working with recent graduates.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah. Like I say, it's tough. I mean, once, especially to get your foot in the door, and a lot of the companies that people are looking to get into, we're already working with those companies. So it's a great, what I call backdoor approach. So if you come to us and let's say you have a certain skill set and there is not an open job at that time, but we know that that company could utilize someone with those skills, what we'll do is what we call skill market you to the company. So we'll tell them, hey, I know you're not looking for someone right now, wink, wink, because they don't always tell you everything. So there's always something on the back burner, and sometimes them seeing those resumes is the catalyst for them to make those changes. Maybe they're trying to weed dead weight. Maybe they're on the fence about a new position, things like that. So oftentimes we'll share a resume with them. Again, it goes back to us building those relationships with them. You were on my mind when I met this candidate, and I thought of your company right away, and I think they might be a great fit for you. So you might want to take a look at this person. So I often will invite people, when you meet with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and then look at my connections. And if you see people in there that are from certain companies that you're trying to get into, let me know that. I'll make introductions, because that's a big part of how people are finding jobs, is to make those introductions from trusted acquaintances, even to the point of friends, to help you maneuver your way in. So I would welcome you. I have my business cards. I'll give them to you.
Great. Thank you so much
Oh
for
my
being
gosh.
with us today.
Thank you for
Lisa.
having me. I
Really
appreciate it.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Looks like the party started.